Welcome to MidLIFE Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgianne Lucier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Margaret Steeves, who has applied her writing and marketing skills in various roles in various industries, and she also serves as a volunteer. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you, Georgianne. It's nice to be here.
Well, you started off, I would think, as a milestone being a class poet in your high school class, and believe that being a writer has helped you take on a lot of different challenges and do well. And also you shared that you're not afraid to try new things. So an example that struck me was when you were in marketing with Webster Bank, and you were tasked with working with Jim Calhoun, who was a celebrity spokesperson for the bank, and your first thought was?
My first thought was, I'm not a sports person. I don't purport to be an expert on any sport, really.
Yeah.
But he was wonderful to work with, and I quickly got over that. I didn't use a lot of my writing skills. That was more of my management skills in that, managing that relationship that we had with Calhoun. But it was 1999. UConn had just won its first NCAA men's championship. Women had been winning all along.
Okay.
He was really great to work with. He was very professional. So we used him in some television spots. We had him at some business entertainment for some of our larger business banking commercial customers. And we held it at Coach's, which was his restaurant in downtown Hartford. It was very casual. He was interviewed by Joe D'Ambrosio, the radio personality for years who covered UConn games. Several of the customers said to us, this is so much more fun than the typical business cocktail party that we get invited to. And then the third thing that we used him with is Jim was a very good motivational speaker. And we had him address our whole retail banking group. And retail banking is all the people, the front-facing people that you see when you go into a branch or you call the customer service line. And he was terrific, great motivational speaker. He had the meeting out of the palm of his hands. He was so good. But it was very enjoyable. So that was a new experience for me, and it was very positive.
And that must have been great for them. They were on like Team Calhoun, right?
For sure.
Yeah, right there.
For sure.
And then you were involved in the earlier days of ATMs, and that took you cross country. You thought that job was very empowering. So I'd like to hear what about it, left you with that memory.
That's very interesting. The whole point of the ATM rollout was really to leverage additional locations for people and to network. So it was sharing your ATMs with people who had a Yankee 24 card. That was the Yankee 24 network based here in Wallingford. It started as a Connecticut sharing network, and then it became New England wide, and then they merged with several others, and hence there's many large networks now. But I traveled all around learning more about the business and promoting ATM sharing, and it was very, very enjoyable. I went to places that I probably would never have been, including Biloxi, Mississippi.
Okay.
And, Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
And it's actually, ATM sharing started in the South.
All right.
We were a little late to it in New England.
So it was a national effort. And about what year was this?
This was in the very late 80s and early 90s.
Okay, so this was before the Webster.
Yes.
Jim Calhoun.
Yes.
Okay. There you are traveling. Did you go with a team? Did you go by yourself?
It was a very small organization, and I was sort of the marketing department.
Okay.
So I either went with the president or I went on my own, which was, either way, it was fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you find empowering about all that? Like, what about your role in terms of how you were able to have autonomy or make things happen?
Well, I think it was a small company, so it was very flexible. Yankee 24 was owned by the large banks, Fleet Bank, Bank of New England, all these legacy banks that, don't exist anymore. But we had just had a very small staff, an operations person, a marketing person, the president, some, support people. To your question, I think what was empowering is that when it's a small company, you either do it or you don't. You either make it happen or it doesn't happen, and you believe in your product and you get out there and you promote it. And because there was a membership fee for banks to join, and they had to comply with the regulations because you're dealing with people's money.
Right.
So they had to have all the encryption things and everything else done, and algorithms and all that sort of stuff. So, but I learned a lot, and I worked for a wonderful people that were very, take the ball and run with it. And you should do that. Don't be afraid.
So it was a startup, really.
It was.
A lot of people
Yeah.
don't get to be part of
Yeah.
startups.
Yeah,
You
I
know, by the
agree.
time they join an organization or a
true.
unit or whatever, the procedures are in place and maybe the great thinking, is believed to have been done, so it's harder to make anything change or be modified. And I've been part of startups, and there's nothing quite like it. I think the stress of startups is unique because you don't really have benchmarks. You're working with the unknowns.
Very true.
You're trying to enroll people in your mission, right? And so the
Yes, it's very
skills
true.
involved with getting people excited
Yeah.
about what you're offering. And did you do a lot of writing in that
I did.
role?
I did a great deal of writing, a lot of PowerPoints and, speeches for the president, things like that. But I think my writing has always been a help to me in my job, even just in organizing my thoughts, in preparing for presentations. Nobody wants to be read to. You really need to be
Right.
a very confident speaker, know your material, connect with your audience, leave them wanting more, not wishing you'd finished earlier.
Well, that's
So,
great.
Yes, and before I was with Yankee 24, I was with an advertising agency, a great advertising agency, and one of the things they did was they really invested in their employees. They gave us Myers-Briggs training. They gave us Communispond training, which is an executive communication national training, which was great about how to do presentations. Now, mind you, this was the days when people had flip charts and transparencies and
Right.
overheads. I mean, things are obviously much different, but there's certain skills that you still use when you do presentations, and I still draw on those.
And so you were building on that all the while.
sure.
For 16 years, you worked at Masonic here in
Here in
Wallingford
Wallingford,
as
yes.
head of the marketing effort.
Yes.
When you joined, you didn't really know much about healthcare, right?
I didn't. I knew, so I knew marketing and knew it well. And I knew branding, which is a really important part of marketing. And when I was hired, they really wanted more support for their brand because their point of difference was that Masonic, and continues to be, that Masonic care is a continuum of care. But I didn't know about nursing homes. I didn't know about assisted living. I didn't really understand the whole retirement piece. I didn't understand the reimbursement piece, Medicare, Medicaid, and how much that drives decisions, as well as long-term care insurance, drives decisions that people make as they get older. So what I really did was educate myself, and I went right to the source. I went straight to the nurses who were the admissions nurses. I went straight to the social workers who worked with the families of residents who had dementia, straight to the people who were living in our retirement community, and actually had focus groups with them. How did you come to make this decision? And that really became fodder for messaging, for ads that we did. And I met so many wonderful people. I made so many great friends. The seniors are just, they're just like you and me, and they love to talk about their lives and
Yeah.
their families, and they like the social piece. It's very big.
And you had used a term I thought was interesting, diplomatic immunity, right? When you join a new organization. So again, someone may be listening that
You know what?
isn't in marketing,
That
isn't in
is-
healthcare, but
That is advice I give to people all the time. I'll say, you know what, if you're new to an organization, you have diplomatic immunity, anywhere from the first 90 days to the first year. But don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you wait 5 years to ask it, they're going to, why is she asking it now? But it's really your time to learn, and people want to talk about what they do.
right.
So it's a great way to make connections.
So a little bit of a listening tour, right, is what
For
you
sure.
did. You went around and
sure.
really, as you said, focus groups. Did you speak with children of, like adult children?
Adult children, we certainly did, yes.
Okay, because those
Yes.
are big,
They're big decision makers
Yeah.
in assisted living and
Yep.
in long-term care. In independent living, maybe not quite so much.
right. Okay. And then you involved some of these people that you went out and spoke with, maybe some of them were the same, with a campaign where you did actual ads
We did.
and using actual residence, which one of the
We did.
executives recommended that. And there was a cast party, and talk about that a little
Oh,
bit.
that was fun.
Okay.
So we had done some ads. We had selected residents from across our continuum. So we had independent living, assisted living, and even long-term care residents. And they had a ball. We had them. He said, you have to get into makeup at 8 a.m. You know.
Okay, yeah.
And we asked them to wear colorful clothes, and we had so much fun. But anyway, so then, right before we launched the whole campaign, it was called the Old and Bold campaign. Right before we launched that, we had a cast party. So we rented a red carpet, and when they came in, they walked down the red
Nice.
carpet. A woman who worked with me found little chocolate, like it looked like Oscar statues. So we gave everybody the cutest couple, you know, things like
Nice.
that. We really had fun, and you know, the CEO spoke,
Yeah.
and you know, we had refreshments, and it was just a lot of fun. And I'm sorry, and then the program we made looked like a playbill,
Okay.
like a Broadway playbill. So yeah,
Oh, that's
so It
great.
was a lot of fun, and they
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and there was so much goodwill created, and to celebrate these people.
So you've had a lot of career success, and let's talk about some of the things that, you know, we've talked about your writing skills. Other things that you think were components of your career success.
I think networking has played a very big part in my career. I'm officially retired now, but just about every job I've ever had, I got through networking, not through an ad in the paper or online or even LinkedIn, which I know obviously social media now is a big component to that
Right.
for people, for sourcing opportunities. But for me, it was truly through kind of old-fashioned networking, joining Women in Communications, joining the PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, joining, you know, those kinds of organizations, and then going to the meetings, not just,
Right.
you know, joining and then not going to the meetings, or getting on a committee. So, program committee is always a good one to get on, because then you really are reaching out to other professionals and building knowledge base. So that was very, very good. And when I worked at Webster, because I worked at a bank, people would always want me to be the treasurer, and I'm like, you don't really want me to be the treasurer.
Don't let me near the money.
But the networking was very valuable,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you brought that up. And I think people should look for mentors, and I think people should be a mentor. And you kind of get to a point in your career where you realize, now it's time for me to be a mentor and give back.
Yeah. And the humanities you mentioned, right? Your foundation in
Well,
terms
I
of your...
really want to give a plug for the humanities.
Yeah.
I believe people should be career focused, and I understand, you know, with how expensive college is.
Right.
People, you know, don't want to graduate, no debt, all debt and no job. But please take some time to also pursue the humanities, or include the humanities in your studies. Logic, history, you know, creative writing, literature, these things are timeless. Art history, these things are just so timeless, and things that add richness to your life.
And you're not going to get necessarily a chance to go back to that once you're very consumed in whatever path.
Very much
you're
so.
in,
But
so.
I still go to museums now, and I remember art history class I had in college, or I go to a Broadway show, and I go, oh, I remember reading the book that this was based on. And,
Right.
and it's really, I think, very enriching. And I just think it informs your life.
Right. And it probably gives you a broader palette, if you will, to work with in whatever your chosen field is. You've just got more of a foundational structure that you can call on. And you became a mom later in life.
I did.
And
I
how did Margaret manage?
I'll never forget, I was 39 years old, and I told my boss I was pregnant, and I thought he was going to fall off the chair. He just asked me if I would move to New Jersey, but they were moving the company to New Jersey.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, I won't be able to do that. Everybody was very excited for me. My husband and I were thrilled to be expecting. We hadn't thought it would take as long as it did. But anyway, we have a son who got married in September, and I was very fortunate to have a very supportive husband, incredibly supportive. We also had parents who lived nearby who were happy to help up. They weren't the child care, but they
Right.
were happy to help. My husband was very supportive of my career because I worked long hours. I didn't travel as much when I had Christopher, but still,
Yeah.
worked long hours.
And he had some flexibility, I understand, being in a consulting
Correct,
role. So the
correct.
drop-off, pickup.
Yes. So
Yeah.
Joe was a consultant who worked, most of the time he worked out of the house, but
Right.
he had some, needs to travel and so forth.
Right.
So we did utilize daycare, but I would do the drop-off in the morning, and he would do the pickup at night. And this is kind of funny. What we noticed at the daycare center that we used, which was a pretty good-sized place, mostly it was the dads that were doing the drop-off in the
Okay.
morning. So I met all the dads.
Uh-huh.
And then it was mostly the moms that were doing the pickup at night. So Joe met all the moms.
Okay,
which
so
was
you
kind
had
of
it covered.
interesting.
Yeah. And he's a great cook.
And I guess it was because everybody's going home to make dinner.
Yeah, right. And he, being a good cook, that helps as
Very
well, right?
much,
It's not
yes.
waiting for you to show up and,
Right.
yeah, put dinner on the table. And then, now you mentioned you are retired, and you thought about your mom who wondered how she ever found time to work.
Yes, my mother taught for over 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
and when she retired, she was so busy. She goes, I don't know when I had time to work,
Mm-hmm.
because she was a very active volunteer, and she had begun volunteering even before she retired, but she really supersized it after
Yeah.
she retired. And I think that's advice I would give to people as they begin to think about retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait till the day you're packing up your office
Right.
and they're having the farewell party to think about what you're going to do. Really plans. I've had friends who they decided they wanted to learn how to speak Spanish. They started taking Spanish lessons. I have another friend who took master gardening classes. I've always enjoyed gardening, so I knew I would want to join the local garden club, and I would want to do some volunteer work, which I have in fields that are of interest to me, including education and gardening, and those are probably the primary ones.
Okay. And one is you are vice chair of Connecticut Landmarks. So tell us a little bit about
So
that
Connecticut
organization.
Landmarks is the organization that oversees 12 historic properties in Connecticut, including the Nathan Hale Homestead in Coventry, the Bellamy Faraday House in Bethlehem, Connecticut, and a number of other beautiful historic properties. And so I'm the vice chair, and we're really charged with the stewardship of these, promoting them, telling stories about them. And some of the stories are painful because some of these properties date back to when their people were enslaved. And that's all part of, the whole diversity and equity piece that we need to make sure that we're sensitive to.
And also, well, there's the lilac, roses, and peonies, right? That's the Bellamy?
So the Bellamy
house?
Faraday house, that was the house that Caroline Faraday lived in. And she was the inspiration for the book The Lilac Girls
Okay.
by Martha Hall Kelly. It's a beautiful property. It's not as old as most of the other Connecticut landmark properties. It's probably, early 1800s. Some of them are quite a bit older. What she did was she really, Caroline was instrumental in bringing these women who were in the Ravensbrück concentration camp and experimented on medically, brought them here to the United States to have corrective surgery after the war. And it was wonderful. I mean, they had to work with international governments. She got the French Medal of Freedom, I think it was.
Okay.
And the book celebrates what she did, but the property itself, when you mentioned the flowers, so the flowers are beautiful, and they highlight the lilacs in this book, The Lilac Girls. The property has beautiful magnolias, it has beautiful peonies, beautiful roses, and it doesn't happen every year, but every once in a while, I've been told that, it has never happened when I've been visiting, that the peonies, the roses, and the lilacs are out for just a few days at the same time.
Same time?
Yeah.
Wonderful. And your dad inspired you with his appreciation for nature and beauty, and that's part of
Yes,
your,
yes.
maybe, beginning of your interest in all of that. And you
Yeah.
are chair of communications for a garden club, right? And you took on the challenge of doing a newsletter.
I did. Yes,
Okay.
I offered initially to write the newsletter, and thinking someone else would actually be the graphic designer, or we
Right.
would find a template, and that didn't. Let's just say that didn't materialize.
Okay.
So it turned out I had to do the layout as well. So I struggled with that initially, but I feel I've really had quite a learning curve, and everybody's very complimentary of it. And I think it shows that you can still continue to learn
I was
things.
just going to say it's a perfect
Yeah,
example.
continue to learn things, and
I
I
can do
really enjoy
this.
it.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
I think as
enjoy
we have accomplishments, and we gain a sense of, all right, what worked in the past, you know, how can I get some resources, networking, who might I reach out
Right.
to, you know, the research involved, and the confidence to do it. And it sounds like you've had that confidence all along, which is wonderful, and help, you know, lead to your success.
Well, I think I have confidence, but I said to somebody once, the newsletter, I'm a impatient person and I'm a perfectionist, and that's a very bad combination.
But the newsletter's alive and well at this point, right? We're happy to report.
is, yes.
Okay. You have a book with you, actually, right? We're speaking
I
about
do.
books.
Yes, a very wonderful friend gave me this book before I retired called Women Rowing North, and it's by Mary Pfeiffer. I've heard her interviewed on public radio. She also wrote Reviving Ophelia, which was a bestseller. It's a wonderful book about aging gracefully, embracing life's journey, and she has wonderful insights. And it's the kind of book, too, that you can pick up. You know, I read the whole book, love it, but then just pick it up every so often and just get some of her words of wisdom,
Yeah.
which are very encouraging and very affirming.
For people who don't know Reviving Ophelia, that was about the transition young women make.
Right.
And here she
Right.
is talking about the transition to being an elder,
Right.
moving, you know, however that's
Yeah.
defined, and, you know, a
Yeah,
lot of it, of course.
retirement and
yes, affected
changes
by
in
people's
life
health and
situation. Correct.
You
I'm
also,
not on the payroll for this.
No,
I
no,
just
oh,
want you to
absolutely.
know.
Okay. But speaking of books, you're in a book group, you do yoga, you volunteer for other nonprofits, and you are an ambassador of St. Joe's, right?
I am
So when you
ambassador
talked
for the
about,
University of St. Joseph.
Yep.
And I actually served on their task force 5 years ago when they were looking at the whole issue of going co-ed in the undergraduate division. The graduate division's been co-ed forever. That was a wonderful experience, and I enjoyed helping to promote that change, which was a very big change.
yeah.
And actually, full circle, Coach Calhoun ended up coming over to University of St. Joe's and starting the men's basketball program there.
Okay.
Yes, so it
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There was something else that you mentioned
Oh,
that I.
well, there's the Connecticut Science Center. You're involved
No, there
with
was
them as
something
well?
else. I think
Okay.
just the yoga, which is wonderful to be
mhm.
able to have the time to really enjoy that, which I think is very good. And
The book group.
the book group and just
Yeah.
reading in general.
Right.
I just think reading is so rewarding. And when I worked full time on vacation, and my husband and son used to make fun of me because this is before I had an e-reader, and my suitcase would be mostly books.
Yeah,
And I would
yeah.
read a book a day.
Right.
And it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And now I have an e-reader, so I can travel a little more lightly.
Right.
And I don't have to wait till I'm on vacation to indulge my love of reading.
And I believe writers typically are big readers. I mean, that informs
I
the
think you're
ability
right.
to write.
Yes.
I think they're encouraged to read. So, absolutely. And then there's Connecticut Science Center. I believe you're involved with them.
I have volunteered at the Connecticut Science Center in their gardens. The Connecticut Master Gardeners, actually, that's an activity that they do. I am not a master gardener. I joke that I'm a master weeder.
Okay.
But I have volunteered there actually since COVID. And part of it was just to get outside.
Get out. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do encourage people to check out Connecticut Science Center in downtown Hartford. It's a pretty amazing place. They have a whole butterfly encounter, which is just beautiful.
So we've talked about Mary Pfeiffer and Women Rowing North, and as we age, we can reflect. We won't get the benefit of some distance. And thinking about key decisions, influences. So what advice would you give your younger selves?
I probably would have not been as afraid of the sciences. I was a little, I sort of felt you're either a humanities or an English and arts kind of person, or you're a science math person. And you don't have to be either or. You can be both. And I wish I had been a little bit more open to those things.
Okay.
Am I ready to take a trigonometry course? No.
No. Are you interested in doing that? No. However, and actually a recent guest had a dilemma because she was very good in the arts, like won some contests and had encouragement as an artist herself, and then also was very good with math and business,
Oh.
and she ended up going the business route, but in her retirement she took it upon herself to study architecture on her
Oh,
travels.
wonderful.
So interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
she felt she did need
Yeah.
to make a bit of a choice with that.
That's great. Or pursue it at another time.
At another time,
Yes.
exactly what?
Yes.
Yeah. And what about your maybe more midlife self, like 40 or something? Any reflections? Well, you're becoming a mom at that point,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think that I tried to be involved in our son's school, but that was difficult. I remember.
Right.
I mean, the reality is, there was a time he said, "Mom, could you be a room mother?" And I'm like, "I really
Nah.
can't.
Right.
I'll go on a couple of class trips with you." And then, of course, comes the time when they don't want you anywhere near them. You know,
Right.
when it's in school.
Yeah.
You know.
Drop me off down here
I
and
know,
I'll walk the rest
I know.
of the way.
I
Yeah.
used to say, you teach your child to look both ways before they cross the street, and now they look both ways before kissing you in public.
Right, right, right. Oh my goodness, that's sweet. A favorite quote or mantra? I think you have a couple.
I do. I love, there's a beautiful one from Malala, whom I just would encourage everybody to read her book, I Am Malala. It's beautiful. And Maya Angelou also has one that I love, which is, people may not remember what you said or did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I think that's very compelling. And then there's a quote of my own mother, who was a teacher for years, and she said, and I truly believe this, if you love to read, you're never alone.
Perfect.
And my mother had books galore. She had about 8 books on her nightstand, always open at each time. And she read, right up until, into her 90s.
Wonderful. Margaret, this has been terrific. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
And please tune into your future guests on Midlife Matters. I'm Georgianne Lucier, your host, and thank you for joining us.